Mr. Rob Iger, thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me, Carter. It's a pleasure.
Of course, welcome to the Electric Circus. I've been a fan of your work, of your film criticism for about a decade now, since I was like 12. So I owe a lot to you for helping develop kind of my critical eye and the way I see movies, the way I see media. So thank you so much for that. First of all, what inspired you to do YouTube videos? Because you were very early to the kind of film criticism online, scene.
Well, YouTube had not long started. When I started posting on YouTube, it was a fairly new thing and hardly anybody was using it. I'd been making films for years and I've been writing and directing and editing and things like that. And I also had a background in mental health. I was doing a lot of psychology stuff. I was learning how to do hypnosis and NLP and things like that. And I was combining that stuff with film, and I was doing a lot of subliminal stuff in my own short films. And it got to a point where I moved to Manchester and suddenly I didn't have enough money to make any more short films of my own. And at the same time as I was doing subliminal stuff in my own movies, I was starting to notice it in popular films like Alien and The Shining and Hitchcock films, Psycho and so on. And so I started thinking, okay, maybe I can do some videos on this. And YouTube was new at the time. So I just had to go. I just thought I'll just do some videos for YouTube showing people about this subliminal stuff in popular movies, just thinking maybe a few hundred filmmakers would take an interest and everyone else would just think it would be crazy. But no, it caught on really quick.
And intellectually, what were your influences? Someone like Kubrick with the subliminal messaging he puts in his movie. A lot of people point to his interest in Carl Jung and psychoanalysts. For you, with the kind of subliminal approach to filmmaking, for you, what got you into that? What got you thinking about that?
Well, it wasn't really Kubrick. I was a big fan of Kubrick, but I had no idea of the subliminal stuff that he was doing. I wasn't really into Carl Jung and stuff like that at the time. I got more into that later on. It was the hypnosis stuff I was studying and the NLP and things like that. I was learning a lot about symbolism in dreams, things that you can take dreams and study them and find out what was going on unconsciously that caused you to have a dream. And why the details are a certain way in a dream, things like that, and things to do with hypnotic inductions of how subliminal things can be done by the person who's doing the hypnotic induction, things they can do with the body language, little verbal embeds that they can do that cause a person to go into a trance state and things like that. There's not like one or two things that a person does. When someone's doing like a hypnotic trance, to somebody, if they're a really good hypnotist, they will be throwing all kinds of small subliminal suggestions in all over the place. It's a bombardment, and it has a big cascading effect that puts the other person into a trance. But it isn't one single thing, and so the other person can't just pinpoint and say, "Oh, don't be swinging a watch in front of me," Mm-hmm. And so I was learning about all that stuff, how things can be communicated visually, non-verbally, and with double entendres in the language and stuff like that for hypnotic effect. And I was doing it in my own films, and that's where that stuff came from. And then I started noticing that other filmmakers had been doing it as well.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I guess just kind of speaking of that, I know in light of a lot of recent information about kind of Jeffrey Epstein's activities and the Epstein files just continuing to prove how sex-obsessed corruption pervades every part of society, a lot of people have looked back at Eyes Wide Shut as being a warning kind of explicitly and subliminally from Kubrick about the true nature of those elite networks. What do you think about that read of the film? Do you think there's any validity to that?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it's specifically about the Epstein case. I don't think Epstein himself was prominent enough at the time. And if Kubrick was making a film about Epstein personally, I think he would have put much more clear clues in. He could have got stuff in about tropical islands and things like that. Yeah. But there isn't really any of that. I think Kubrick was just getting at the sexual attitudes of people in positions of power that go on quite a lot. And it seems to span the ages all throughout history. I mean, sexuality is very much tied in with ego. And so is the acquisition of power. A lot of people pursue careers with power positions so that they can feel like I'm great. It's like they feel like they're a complete loser if they're not in control of everybody else or something like that. And that ties in with the sexuality. You know, those kinds of people that they want to sexually dominate others. They want to be able to sexually control other people. And if they don't have that sexual control, they feel inferior. So that's there in Dr. Strangelove. You've seen Dr. Strangelove, haven't you?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got the what's his name? The character who sends the nukes off without permission to Russia, General Jack D. Ripper, and he's talking about he feels like his sexual prowess is failing as he gets older, and he doesn't want to let go of that. And it's almost like him launching this nuclear war is like his attempt to maintain his own sexual prowess. It's directly tied in to his desire for control and status and things like that. And I think Kubrick was really onto that stuff about the connection between sexual ego and power trip ego for people who are in bureaucratic positions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that that theme echoes in his work beyond those two films? Because that's the first thing I thought of. In Doctor Strangelove, that's definitely a major theme, you know. And a nuke being kind of a phallically shaped object, I think, you know, is no coincidence. You know, the opening scene of those two planes appearing to have intercourse, you know,
Yeah.
and it's just once you know to look for it, it just beats you over the head throughout the entire film. And the man thinking his sexual impotence comes from some grand conspiracy to poison him into being less fertile than he once was. Yeah, it's absurd. So, yeah, do you see in a film? Did you pick up on any of those themes in a film like Full Metal Jacket or something?
Oh yeah. Full Metal Jacket's got it
Yeah.
all over the place. Yeah, you know, the tough guys. It's like we're all going to bang a prostitute and you know, skip the foreplay and all that kind of stuff. And it's everywhere in Full Metal Jacket. And you know, even in the first half of the movie, the drill instructor is constantly berating them about their sexual prowess, their sexual status. You know, he's
Yes.
constantly accusing them of being gay. He tries to associate rifles with the penis. You know, this is my rifle, this is my gun, this is for fighting, this is for fun. He's directly associating the two. And it's there in The Clockwork Orange, definitely, the sexual motives of Alex wanting to dominate sexually. It's there in Lolita. It's there in The Shining, but you have to get into the hidden narrative of that film with the abuse stuff that's going on. It's not there on the surface level, so obviously in The Shining. And it's there in Barry Lyndon as well. You know, Barry Lyndon sleeps with a lot of women throughout the film, and he likes to cheat on his wife and stuff like that. It's very consistent throughout his work, isn't it? You know, the only film that doesn't seem to be there is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah. You know, that has me thinking of so much of, you know, Kubrick was still operating in a time where sexual imagery, sexual mentioned, maybe sexual acts being in film was still something that I think would be a little bit, maybe some people would be clutching their pearls over it. Where now we're at a point where sexual conversation, sexual imagery, it's in every part of society. It's on, you know, and so much so I've really noticed that a lot of the slang that people my age and people younger, kids in elementary school, like Riz, yacht, stuff like that, those are all sexual, you know, Riz is like sexual charisma, yacht's talking about ass. It's just all these things. It's just this obsession with sexuality. And then if you look at the statistics of how much my generation is engaging in sexual activity, it's at an all-time low. So you have this weird thing where you have this obsession in the media with sexuality, yet in the day-to-day activities, almost nobody's participating in it, or lower than any previous generation. What do you think that says about how the kind of sexual obsession of society, it has this weird counter effect to what you'd usually think?
That's a really interesting observation. I hadn't heard of those slang words before. I guess my daughter didn't bother telling me about them. Sometimes she tells me one or two that she's come across, yeah. Wow, that's... that is quite a contradiction. And off the top of my head, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that people are engaging with each other directly far less and less anyway, because they're all on the phones and stuff like that. And they're not doing face-to-face conversation so much, so maybe that's a factor in it. I think a lot of the time sexuality is also done for for status, for social status. I mean, when I grew up, when I was younger, we didn't have internet, but if you slept with somebody, in your teens, it was like a really big deal, especially if you lost your virginity and you wanted to tell everyone, I shagged someone. That was, all your mates had to know, and the word had to go around everywhere, and it was like a status thing, and actually this went on a lot back then. It probably goes on with what you're talking about now. A lot of people, they don't really want to have sex. They just want to be seen to be having sex because it's considered cool, and it's like a seal of approval. You are capable. I mean, a lot of people back then used to lie that they'd lost their virginity, or they'd lie that they'd slept with this guy. They go for a date or something, and they don't actually sleep with them, and then they lie that they did sleep with them just to impress other people, and then the girl gets pissed off. That stuff used to go on all back then. Maybe that's part of what's going on with it now. A lot of people are getting into talking sexuality and stuff so that they can make themselves seem super cool, but they're not actually doing it.
Yeah, and another thing, I can't exactly pinpoint it, but I feel like Clockwork Orange taps into this energy. Just also, not to be vulgar, but just how available pornography is. If you have a smartphone, which means you're an average member of Western society, and an internet connection, I mean, there's as much as you can possibly get your hands on 30 seconds away at any given time. And especially in the hands of young men, and we've increasingly, a lot of people didn't expect this, but it seems a lot of young women are also struggling with it. It's the sexual imagery, that part of our brain that, I think Kubrick would also say is a driver of almost every achievement, every action we have. It's just getting hijacked by these information technologies.
Yeah. Well, we've had one interesting thing that's happened here in Britain over the last, I think this happened about maybe 6 months ago. And that is, for once, our government did something good. They put the blockers on all the porn, so the kids can't access it here now, or even the adults can't access it unless they sign up to something and go through a verification thing to access it. And so that means a lot of adults are not going to be accessing it because they don't want to give the personal details that confirms that they're accessing this stuff, and they don't want to give their details to these porn companies who will just use it to pass it on and sell it to other people, and then they get bombarded with penis enlargement emails and things like that, Yeah, so it's that's a good thing that's happened here, and I'm really glad it's happened because my daughter's 12, and she's hit puberty now, and for a while I've been like, I don't want her to discover this stuff, because the sex that is in those porn films is often so disgusting and vile and degrading that I can imagine, like, if my daughter saw that, she would just get put off men for life, And I've known other people who've told me that, some other kid showed my kid some hardcore stuff, and my kid was traumatized, and I'm like, this is just terrible. So I'm really glad our government's done that, and I think that should be done across the board regarding porn. Of course, a lot of people sort of get upset about it and say, this is going to be used as a stepping stone to stop us from accessing other things on the internet. It's going to be used as a stepping stone for stopping free speech. Maybe it could go in that direction, but I don't think it necessarily has to. I mean, I don't believe in having absolutely any type of media content available for absolutely anybody just for the purposes of saying, we live in a free society. I don't want to see, let's say we've got, for example, over like in the FBI behavioral science unit there in America, where they've got all the horrific serial killer cases and things, and they've got audio and video recordings of things being done to people by serial killers that the killers recorded themselves. That is all part of the horrific archives that they've got. Now, somebody could come along and say, anyone should be allowed to see that. It's not harmful if you watch it. No. You've got to draw a line at things like that. And I think letting the kids see the hardcore stuff, the line has to be drawn there. So our government has done a really good thing there. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely tend to agree, because, I mean, here in the U.S., we had the U.S. Patriot Act created, the most ironically named act in light of 9/11. And that just basically said, we should constantly be able to spy on you, because what if you're a terrorist? And that's like, okay, that logic doesn't really pan out. But to say, children and adults well, definitely children should not have access to those kind of websites, and adults should have to, put up a little bit, show your ID to be able to access it, to hopefully deter a lot of people from doing it. It's like, yeah, I think that's a logic that is pretty. That I don't see a ton of malicious intent behind that. You know what I mean? I don't see a lot of subversive intent behind that.
Yeah.
So many areas of conversation there. We could touch back on later. But something I want to ask you about is there are some movies that are seen as defining their time because they were both original in storytelling and also pushed the limits of available technology. Something about that just creates magic, you know? Like 2001, Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Toy Story, The Matrix, etc. With how advanced CGI, camera technology, and editing have become, are there any recent movies that you think truly push the limits of 2020's technology, but also have something new to say?
No.
Yeah.
I know you sent me that as part of your emails, one of the questions, and I had a good hard think about it. You know, I made some notes. I'll tell you what I wrote in my notes about that one. Well, yeah, I wrote nothing was my initial response, and I was struggling to think back. And I thought the Blair Witch Project, it doesn't use CGI, but I thought the technical approach to filmmaking, it went in the opposite direction of CGI, and it was just rough as hell, to a point that very few movies had ever done before, and it worked, and they used it narratively. So for me, that was a major one. I thought the Kubrick Spielberg movie AI Artificial Intelligence from 2001 was a major step forward. It dealt with the issues of technology. And the CGI in it was amazing. It's still better than most CGI today. Yeah. And I normally don't like watching CGI graphics. They don't normally impress me. Yeah, I find CGI boring because no matter how well it's done, I'm just like, some guys just sat there with a computer and created a load of polygon meshes and animated it, and then just rendered it and, you know, threw some textures on and stuff. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what goes on screen. It's the exact same process for all of these different graphics and stuff. It doesn't matter whether you've got a tiny little monster walking on the table or you've got a huge Godzilla. It's the same technical technique that's being used for them all. So it never really impresses me. And, well, I mean, Starship Troopers impressed me a lot when that came out, because still today, those creatures, they really look like they're there. And I think the quality of CGI has gone downhill quite a lot. I think it peaked with movies like that and the AI movie. Bear with me a moment. What's this? Right, okay. Yeah, I mean, one movie that did conceptually impress me a great deal, but it doesn't involve technical filmmaking, was the Australian movie Snowtown from 2012, which was the real-life serial killer drama. Have you seen that one?
I've not.
No. Only watch if you've got a strong stomach, because the issues that it deals with are so powerful. But that movie is dealing with subject matter that is so disturbing but very important that the film would never succeed commercially because it's just too disturbing. I watched it once and it took me 7 years to watch it again, but the messages are so important in it about how people who believe that they are going on a crusade of justice can actually be the nastiest people underneath it. And it's a real life example of that. You're probably not familiar with the case, but I'll just give you the very basic overview. Is this lunatic called John Bunting? He had an absolute hatred for paedophiles, and he wanted to kill them and torture them to death and stuff. You know, execution wasn't enough, and he was a total sadist. Well, anyway, he went into this community in Adelaide in Australia. The community was rife with paedophiles. It was a very poverty-stricken community, and they had generations of kids who've been abused and then abusing their own kids. And so he went in there and he was like the knight in shining armor to that community, and he helped them, and he got a team together of people in that community, and they went round hunting down and killing paedophiles in the community, but killing them in the most horrific ways imaginable. And but then they moved on and started killing people who were just like gay or a yuppie or things like that. And it was just, it became obvious later down the line. It was never about the crusade against the paedophiles. It was just about his sadistic urges, you know? And so, yeah, I thought that was a really powerful movie because no one can argue against the message because it really happened, you know. So conceptually, that was, I think, the last thing that came out that really blew my mind. I can't think of much else since then. But I'm at a point now where I'm turning my back on a lot of CGI. I don't want to see any more green screen stuff. I am desperately wanting to see movies where everything is filmed with real actors wearing real costumes in a real environment. All of the backgrounds are real locations or maybe studio built. I don't want to see any more stuff where I'm looking at things on screen that have been generated by a computer and are being pushed upon me as if they were filmed for real. I don't want to see that anymore. I'm sick of it.
Yeah, and that reminds me a lot of this kind of conversation. You know, I'm a big believer, and I push that the past couple decades have seen broadly a decline in the quality of film, quality of music, quality of literature that the public is engaging with, that's getting mainstream traction. But a huge area where that's just not the case is video games. Where video games, you know, a lot of people would say the late 90s, you had the peak, you know, the Nintendo 64 and Sega, all these things. And then moving into the GameCube, PlayStation, and Xbox get introduced. And there's just so much innovation. They're pushing the technology. But now we're at a point kind of where we're talking about CGI, where we're at a point where it looks as realistic as possible. But anytime you try to do realism, 5 years later, it doesn't look so good. Now, Grand Theft Auto 5 looked great for 2013, but 5 years later, I don't know. And now it's like, okay, you know, that was really good for the time. But a game like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the characters look ridiculous, look like little polygons, but it's so charming, it's so perfect. Or a game like Zelda Ocarina of Time, that's timeless, how polygon and silly and the animations and everything. So I would definitely tend to agree with CGI of its, you know, there are these sweet spots and pockets of, you know, if you watch an original cut of Star Wars, how haphazard yet perfect so many of the special effects are and everything. It's just something that can't be beat, you know, and the stories you get behind it, of you get to learn there's dozens and dozens of stories of how, oh, this is how they did that effect. This is a little thing in the background you can notice. But with CGI, I mean, everything, it's too perfect. It's too well generated. And there's a team of decision makers. It's not a couple guys putting together costumes. So I definitely agree. On to the broader discussion of what movies do I think have kind of innovated. I think there was a movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once that came out a couple of years ago, and I found it touching emotionally. I didn't find the narrative itself to be too innovative, but the technology involved. It's the first movie I've seen to do really fast-paced editing that it didn't feel like a gimmick. It fit into the story well because these are characters that are jumping between different timelines every couple seconds. So to see they're in the Grand Canyon now, and they're in the embodiment of pebbles. They're pebbles with eyeballs, and then, you know, they're somewhere else, and then they're at a fashion show. All these things, I thought, you know, this is something that just due to technology could not have been done 10, 20 years ago, and you know, it's still a movie that I don't think since then, a couple of years ago, people have really been able to capture something since, you know? But yeah, I think you also hit on the point that I didn't think about, but the ability to do professional quality stuff that's regressing away technologically, like a Blair Witch, Cloverfield, I think is another one people point to, and even, you know,
Cloverfield was okay, you know.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bad film.
And there's a lot of independent projects on YouTube that are just kind of filmed on a smartphone. And a lot of people will claim, oh my gosh, if you saw it, you'd think it's as good as any movie. So I want to ask you kind of this follow-up. One of the early hopes for video sharing on the internet was that independent creators would be unbound by studios and corporations and could create as they please without restriction. As a person who's been creating videos on the internet for over a decade, what have you found on the internet that will stand the test of time as well as any classic film?
Right. I did make a few notes on this and remind myself of it. It's okay. Okay. So one of the issues was that it's very hard for something to establish itself in the same manner that, say, a classic movie or book would from pre-internet, because when something comes out now that powerfully impacts things, it immediately gets imitated all over the place. There'll be hundreds and hundreds of podcasters and other filmmakers who will go, oh my God, everyone's paying attention to that. And then within days, they're posting about it. And suddenly it's not become about the original source. It's become a larger subject matter. So I think that is kind of killing some of these things off in terms of a particular source that lasts in itself and is identified as the cause of that particular issue. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think.
So go on.
Go ahead. I was going to say, even by extension, I think another thing affecting this is kind of the irony poisoning of everything. So it's like Arctic Monkeys, that I think are a great band. They're kind of a take on punk before them. And, you know, you need to fully appreciate the band. I think you need to have that background. But then there are guys my age that don't have that background. They grew up with the Arctic Monkeys. So then they're doing their twist on the Arctic Monkeys, not really knowing the heritage of what they're working with, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So they think it's about, or like Oasis with the Beatles. Oasis are far less innovative than the Beatles. They're very much, but they're their own thing, and it's great. But then people are imitating Oasis. So that original magic of the 60s or something, as the copies are being replicated over and over and over and over, and newer people are looking at those and becoming new copies, the original blueprint just gets completely lost.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real shame, isn't it? It's, yeah, a lot of innovative things, just that they're not finding their own unique place that they deserve to have. Another thing I wrote down here is that a lot of things disappear from the net. I mean, you know, some video can come out that can get like 40 million views or something on some particular subject, and it can do really well, and then for some reason it gets taken down. The person who uploaded it takes it down, or it gets blocked or something after so many years, and suddenly it's gone. But the influence is still there, but the original source is nowhere to be found. So it seems to me that like there's a lot of powerful things that are being put out that have the effect, and then the source is lost. So that's I guess that's kind of what I was already saying there. But yeah, that point about it disappearing from the net. Something that seems to be a lot more powerful now in terms of influence is footage of real events, which you didn't really get in the past. You know, you'd have the news on the TV, which is all very selected and corporate controlled and stuff. And nowadays, the average person in the street can film stuff on the phone and just upload it on the net. And if it's really powerful and it's relevant to some issue, you know, it can catch on and get millions of views, and it can spark, you know, a national or international debate on an issue. Just something that someone filmed on the phone. That's amazing that can happen, you know. But I'm not seeing that happen so much with movies and things like that. Maybe the real footage issue is taken over because it's considered more real because, you know, it arguably is real unless someone staged it. So yeah, maybe movies and books and things like that fictional things are taking a background because of the ability of people to upload events that are actually real.
Yeah, the novelist Don DeLillo had an idea in one of his later books. I believe it was published in the 90s. It was something along the lines of, you know, the ability of a great piece of art to capture the public conscious, the entirety of a culture. That's kind of gone away through the phenomenon you're describing. That's something I want to talk more about in a little bit, and that's just how distributed and disorganized the culture is as a large. That he said that terrorism is the final kind of work of art that can have a major impact. It took a long time to understand, like, what does that really mean? That sounds so, I don't know, it sounds so dark. But it's like, yeah, I mean, if you do want to capture everyone's attention and get everyone to look and pay attention to some stupid manifesto you wrote or some message you're trying to send, that's the quickest way to get 4K cameras on you, because now the camera equipment that shoots our movies is in the hands of almost anybody. Like, I'll film a video on my smartphone and I'm shocked. I'm like, this looks like it could be, you know, this is like the best camera technology 20 years ago that I have in my hand, and I can film unlimited anything all day, every day.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. But I also think another thing you were kind of touching on is there's not really a center to the culture anymore when it comes to media consumption. Just, I look at my parents' generation, Generation X, and all of them have seen, like, there's like 100 movies that all of them have seen. And if they have nothing in common, you can fall back on, well, have you seen Back to the Future? You know what I mean? There's always something to go, oh, we have these points of relation. There are these events that we were both there for. There are these celebrities we were both there for, these songs that we both know. But I feel like with my generation, the first that's kind of grown up with internet from the cradle, I know I have a sister that's 4 years older, a brother that's 4 years younger. So I have the media I'm into, they have the ones they're into, but there's such little overlap that they'll be saying, "Do you know what Cardi B was saying the other day?" And I'm like, "I barely know who that is." And it's like, "Oh,
Hmm.
she's like the fourth biggest artist in the world." And I'm like, "Oh,
Hmm.
what? How did I miss that?" Or I think Harry Styles, some of his music is fun. I'll bring that up to them, and they'll be like, "I don't really know about that." And it's like, I thought he was number one, you know? So it's such a weird thing that the only things that we really have in common are Mr. Beast, who has 400 million subscribers on YouTube, and he's like 26, so he's like the most famous person possible at that age, and like Avengers Endgame, which is the most profitable movie ever, basically. But other than that, trying to find solid common ground for a conversation or a temperature check on the culture is very difficult to do.
You know what? I have had some experiences of an overlap. Like I got my daughter to watch a lot of old classic movies, and she actually likes them better than the new ones. You know, if I say to her, "Do you want to watch this movie?" and sometimes she'll ask, "When was it made?" and I'll say, "Oh, this was an '80s film or a '70s," and she'll go, "Okay." And she's actually said it herself. The new movies are crap. Apart from she likes the kids' films, like we watched Zootopia 1 and 2. They were kind of fun.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of movies that involve human characters, you know, just straight dramas and things like that, she much prefers the old movies. And it's not just her. She's told me that several of her friends have seen Alien and they really liked it. And there are certain movies that still connect with those young audiences. I have my girlfriend and her son, he's 12. I had them watch Starship Troopers, and the lad, he absolutely loved it, you know. I've not seen him engage with many other movies, but yeah, he was really into that one. So there are still some crossovers going on. I mean, I'm not sure exactly why that is, but there are certain older movies that are still connecting with the younger audiences. I mean, The Wizard of Oz is coming up to 100 years old or something. I think it's nearly 90 years old.
Mhm.
1939 was it, Wizard of Oz? Yeah, so it's getting up towards a century old, but still, you can show kids The Wizard of Oz today, and a lot of kids will really get into it. You know, again, my daughter loved that one. So there are still things that are connecting. Um, I don't know how those things are being maintained. I guess it's just the parents showing them the stuff to the kids is what's maintaining it. But we still do get a lot of media coverage. You still get a lot of articles talking about Alien, talking about the Wizard of Oz, you know, talking about The Shining, things like that. And I guess those media articles are getting put out to the young generation, and they're getting introduced to stuff through that, you know. So to them, because it's being covered by today's media, it is relevant. You know?
Yeah, I also think part of it is that, all art is political. I'm a believer in that. But all art in the past didn't have an agenda the way it does today. It feels like now every time I watch something, I'm looking for, okay, what pill are they kind of trying to shove down my throat? How do I filter that out? And
Yeah.
it's incredibly strange. There's a conversation about, wokeism and how it has pervaded film and TV today. And it seems that there's always quotas, there's always angles, things that they can't say, ways they have to frame stories to not upset people. I'm sure you know Christopher Nolan has one part about his Oppenheimer film that I think was part of what made it great is how historically accurate every character was. Like he really seemed to do his damnedest to make sure everyone looked the part, everything looked the part. Yet with his new Odyssey movie, he seems a lot of people online are pointing out he seems to be. I'm sure it'll be great because he's a great filmmaker, but he seems to be having a heyday with I guess DEI for lack of a better word, DEIification of a lot of
Yeah.
characters. So. Do you have any thoughts kind of on that? I know that's a discussion that's been had to death at this point in the pop culture, but anything new to say on that?
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah, art always has had a political edge to it, simply for the basis that art is personal expression. And
Hmm.
in power politics, they don't want personal expression. People are supposed to be controlled and just say and do what the leaders say. So art automatically goes against that in virtually every instance. And so basically, the establishment tries to hijack art and take it away from the people. Art is better in society when it comes from the lower levels and it goes upwards. And it typically challenges the perceptions of whatever's being put out by the people at the top. Art has always had that element to it. But I guess you've always had that elements where leaders throughout history have funded art and used it to push their own ideas and stuff. And sometimes it's resulted in really good stuff. I mean, you look at all the incredible architecture to do with churches and cathedrals and stuff, and I'm blown away. And all the stonemasonry work, I was out with my girlfriend the other day walking around town, and we've got some really good old buildings in Liverpool, and you see all these like gargoyles and dragons etched into the stonework on the buildings and stuff. And like, nobody knows how to do this stuff now. But then stonemasonry was associated with the Masons and the powerful influence they ended up having in the country and stuff like that. So I guess you can get good art that can come from the top as well. But usually that good art from the top usually seems to be on a grandiose, epic, aesthetic level rather than having conceptual power. The kind of art that conceptually challenges and expands people's minds tends to come from lower down. And I think this is why all of this, the DEI agenda stuff and all that in movies doesn't work. I mean, there was a lot of movies that were anti-racist that I really loved when I was younger, and I still love them. Movies like, the original Night of the Living Dead, 1968. You had a lead character who was black, and it was so rare at the time, and he was the hero of the piece. But no big deal was made about his race. It was just like, hey, here's the hero. He just happens to be black, so what? And I was like, that's great. And then you get a movie like 48 Hours from 1982 with Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy. Have you seen that one?
I've not, no.
It's brilliant. So Eddie Murphy is like, he's the convict, and Nick Nolte is the cop. And the two of them have to team up to hunt down these other guys. But Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy, their characters hate each other, and they constantly insult each other about race in the first half of the movie. They call themselves all the slurs and slang words, and it's all done in a very funny way from both sides. And by the end of the movie, they're best buddies. It was a real powerful breakthrough movie on lots of levels. It basically sparked the cop buddy movie genre. But yeah, that movie took the whole race issue and really sort of handled it in a very clever way. And it didn't feel like it was shoving it down your throat because it was done with humour. And it wasn't something where some executives would come along and said, you need to put this in your film. It was just the filmmakers themselves wanted to do that. So when you see those kinds of messages and it comes from the filmmakers themselves and they weren't told to do it by some executive, somehow it ends up feeling more genuine. As soon as the executives get involved and say, here's a bunch of tick boxes, it doesn't work. In fact, it can have the opposite effect, because I've seen so many movies from recent years that are pushing, these ideas like racism is bad. Okay, I know it's bad. I already know that from the past. You keep beating me on the head with it over and over and over again as if I don't already know it. And the film might have a really good way of presenting that message, but I'm so sick of the message now that I lose interest. As soon as I detect these checkbox agendas in a movie, I want to switch the movie off right away. And if I do watch the movie to the end, I don't take notice of the message. It doesn't sink in because I'm like, no, that the filmmakers have just done that to get the funding. So it has the opposite effect for me.
It does feel like a lazy trick too, because if nearly everything is about why being racist is bad, and if you go, okay, I've heard that enough, can we change the channel? And they go, well, if you don't want to hear it again, you must be racist. So it's like, okay, it's like it's a kind of this infinite trap, you know what I mean? That you can always deploy, you can always accuse. Yeah. I know one of the, I think, funniest examples, this is so 21st century, is I think it was Joe Rogan. He had put in, just to kind of prove the point of how much the DEI could potentially harm our, if it does go to this extreme, it could harm our understanding of history. He had asked an AI to generate a Nazi march, and it did, and there was a quarter of them were black women, some of them were Asian, and it's like, okay, wait a minute. I don't know if that's what you wanted when you first proposed diversity programs. People often discuss the economic and potentially violent implications of artificial intelligence, but I worry a lot about waves of AI-induced psychosis just completely eroding society. Knowing that most people get nearly their entire concept of the world from the internet. What can be done to prevent the slopification of media as a whole?
Okay. I don't totally agree that people get their entire perception of the world from, was it the internet, did you say? From the
Hmm.
internet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't totally agree with that because this, this can be quite complex, this, from what I've seen, but a certain message goes out on the internet and stuff like that, and then uh, let me try and rephrase this. People get their views from a mixture of what they see on the internet, plus the media, plus what other people around them are telling them. And where it becomes like brainwashing is where you've got a bunch of people who saw the media stuff or saw the internet version of it, and they just believed it, and then they all go around and repeat the same message to each other and to other people, and they all persuade each other of it. Yeah, but I don't think the media and the internet itself has that much control over people if the people who are watching it aren't continuing and spreading the message. So some ridiculous spin on politics, for example, can be put out by the government, and they'll put money into it. They'll pay off some newspapers and stuff, and out it goes. And a lot of time and money has gone into putting this propaganda message out. But if the population don't latch onto it and start spreading it around amongst themselves, then it fizzles out and has no effect. And I've been seeing this happen many, many times. We've got a government here in Britain that's really struggling with its popularity at the moment. They're pretty much hated. I think the voting intention polls in the last month or two, actually longer than that, going back at least 6 months, have had them way down below 20%. This is the government in power. 4 in 5 people are like, no, I'm not voting for these at the next time round. And they've just done absolutely terrible in local elections. And this government has been pushing out loads and loads and loads of propaganda messages to try and persuade people back on board with them, and none of it is working. Even the issue, what I described about the porn being taken off the kids, I think this government should have used that one and said, hey, we're the only ones who've done this. We're protecting your kids from this. So they did that, but they're not using it. And instead, they're running around still saying everyone who doesn't want to vote for us is racist. And it's not working, because that kind of propaganda requires the population itself to pick up the message and enforce it on each other. Yeah? So I think in that respect, the population themselves have got a great deal more power than they think they have. The population needs to accept the message and enforce it on each other, basically. And if they don't do that, then it loses its power. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot more nuance to it, and like I think one of the tricks being pulled is that even if they're putting out propaganda nobody disagrees with, nobody agrees with, they're still giving this idea that there is an alternative. So, like for example, if someone critical of migration in Britain, if they're thinking in their mind, I need to be prepared to be called racist for even thinking I have any sort of problem with this. I need to have counter arguments ready. I need to maybe not bring it up at the dinner table, because even if people agree with me, I don't want to sound racist, the way I say it. Well, now you have this kind of self-censorship, and that's a very left-wing phenomenon, and we have that definitely here in America. But I think even like a right-wing version is here in America. Donald Trump said the 2020 election was stolen from him, and even though, hey, if there was evidence of it, I'm open to it, but he didn't really have any receipts or evidence to kind of prove that. Everything's been shot down in court, has been disproven. But there's still this idea that if you say the 2020 election wasn't stolen, there's this idea, imagined or not, that there's a massive coalition of people that are prepared with facts to counter that. So it's this whole thing of even if all it does is make you self-censor a little bit, change the way you word something, that's enough,
Yeah, yeah.
And I think William Burroughs had this idea that, language is like a virus. It can't help but replicate. If I hear an idea I'm really interested in, I'll tell people around me. And if you find it interesting, you'll tell other people. And boom, everyone, very soon, almost everyone has it. So I think part of the internet thing that, well, I notice it gets scary is when people have particularly young people, have a lived experience, and then they get the internet sensationalized version. They see 3 videos that kind of go against their lived experience, and they go, wow, maybe I'm wrong the way I experience it. Maybe it's actually worse, or maybe it's actually better in this respect than I thought. I'm going to go with the internet over my lived experience. And I think that's the danger. You know what I mean? But with AI, do you see a lot of this stuff getting worse? Like you'd mentioned CGI, and I think there's going to be a lot of debates over AI use in that, and just across filmmaking and media in general. How do you see that?
Oh, there's a bunch of different questions you asked there. My brain's gone off on about 5 different things all at once. Right. I was going to answer your first question there, and then I lost my answer because you asked the second question. Can you go back to the first one again?
Yeah, I think I was just talking about how language is a virus and it can't help but replicate, and something, people choosing they'll choose what they see online over their lived experience. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I think I've come back to what I was going to say, which was... God, I've lost it again. This was actually something quite important. Give me a moment. You can edit this out shortly. The issue was... Okay, a major issue to do with that is artificial consensus. This is one propaganda tool that works incredibly well. Not all the time, but a lot of the time it does. But some people are getting onto this. And that is that a lot of these sort of the people who get paid to shape the public thought through propaganda, the PR people and all that, I think they came to realize a long time ago that, hey, most people will believe something, or at least pretend to believe it, if they think that everyone else believes it, or if they think that everyone else is pretending to believe it. They're like sheep. Whatever the crowd are saying, they will just say it so that they don't get shot down. And so the propagandists have come up with this a sort of approach where some particular issue that they want to push, they will artificially, they will manufacture evidence of it being a consensus when it's actually not. And we'll see this done in very blatant ways in articles where an article will literally be titled, "The Internet is responding like this to this issue." There will literally be a headline that is like that. What? The internet? It's like the internet is like this big collective of just people who all just agree on this issue in this one way. Bullshit, And they will select like 3 or 4 social media posts, which the journalists might have even posted themselves to serve the story. And they just highlight those in their article and say, look, this is the evidence that, pretty much everyone agrees with this take on this issue. And then a lot of people will read that and go, oh, everyone thinks this, so I better adopt that belief as well. I don't want to be the odd one out. That is still incredibly powerful. Yeah.
I have a question about UFOs later, so I'll table this. But I did want to bring up something that is just pure conspiracy theory, but it makes for an interesting thought experiment. There's something called Project Bluebeam, which proposes that the governments could, I say governments because I think it'd be a more international thing, could stage a fake alien invasion to kind of have a forced world government, a forced unity, or stage that we got invaded and that they were able to stop it, so we kind of owe the government one, something along those lines. And I think the information warfare equivalent of that is happening already. You know what I mean? Of its these kind of planted stories, false victories. So yeah, I think you're totally right. And I mean, are there any other tools of propaganda that you see? And again, now I guess we can tie in AI. Are there any tools of propaganda that you see already in work, or that you see only getting amplified by the use of artificial intelligence? Because I mean, they're saying, if the public has access to some of these AI tools, well, you can certainly imagine that the CIA or MI6, if we have access to technology that seems like it could do impossible things, if you have the imagination and time for it, imagine what these intelligence agencies of thousands and thousands of people, this is all they do for their living. Think about what they can come up with. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I've got real concerns about the AI stuff being used to just completely, utterly flood the internet, so that like 99% of it is artificial and 1% of it is actually people posting stuff, I think there's already a major push going on, especially on on YouTube and some of the other platforms, to try and sideline human creators and push AI versions of their stuff in their place. I was just reading the other day that there's now instances popping up where, you know, people have ad revenue, they have ads in the middle of the videos, and they don't get to choose what the ads are. It's like the algorithm chooses it for them.
Yeah.
And there's been instances where famous YouTubers have had their voice cloned for adverts that they never actually agreed to do. That's something I really don't like. I don't know if that's something that is worked into the YouTube agreement when you sign up. I mean, I don't know if there's ads appearing on my videos that have got a fake version of my voice endorsing products and things that I would not personally endorse. Things like that I don't like, and comment sections being flooded with bots. I think there's tons of that going on as well. I keep noticing the same sort of phrases popping up. You know, multiple videos will appear, and the same, almost the exact same quoted comment will appear across multiple videos, but apparently by different users. Now, I don't know if that's humans reading each other's comments and going, oh, that sounds good, I'll repeat that in another comment section, or whether it's bots or AI just using multiple accounts to post the same comments all over the place. It's at a point now where not only can we not trust whether the video that we're seeing is real, but also whether the likes and dislikes are real, whether the comments are real and the replies to the comments are real. It's just it's bringing everything down and making everything fall under the suspicion of being artificial, to the point where I think people are going to start getting to the point where the only reality is being off the screens completely. And this could actually work out quite well, really. It may actually persuade a lot of people to disconnect a lot with the internet and disconnect with those fucking mobile phones. I hate the things. I don't want to be near them. I don't want one in my life. I can't stand them. And so many people are just sucked in. But as everything in there becomes artificial and more instances of things being artificial comes to light, I think a lot of people might just sort of back off from that stuff and go, you know what? I'm going to go out and engage in the real world with people who are actually in front of me, because I know it's not generated by some fucking AI. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the big worries is that for people like you that I think have adopted the right mindset of it's just not even worth bothering with a lot of this technology. It's just getting sucked in by it. You know, there are studies that show that the material that you read does have an influence on your mind, on your writing, on the way you express yourself. And a lot of that can be used in a productive direction. You know, it's like maybe get off Twitter, start reading more books if you want to know, to be more articulate, if you want to have better ideas, etc. And there have been recent studies showing that people that use AI a lot, not only do they use less brain activity when they're quote unquote writing with the assistance of AI, but also their vocabulary starts to emulate the AIs. So it's this idea of it's like even if you were to say, well, I'm a person that doesn't use AI. Well, if you're reading emails at work, if you're reading any news online, that could be AI itself. So it's back to this like ideas and language as a virus of it's like you're still kind of quote unquote getting infected.
Yeah.
But I also agree optimistically that we'll have kind of a reversion to the past in a positive way of no longer will the illusion that almost everything you're seeing online is human made is real, that we can't help but subconsciously think. That will hopefully completely dissolve, or at least mostly dissolve, because already we're at like a study from a couple of years ago said that like 50 to 60% of all internet traffic is bots. That's horrifying. You know, it's billions of bots. So I see, you know, people unplugging entirely from believing that this stuff is real, which is good. And I also see people reverting back to kind of the forums of the 2000s, you know? So, you know, if the Rob Iger subreddit with 10,000 users, if it comes out that a lot of those are bots, that's a problem. Okay, instead, maybe you'll set up robiger.com with a forum tab run by a couple moderators, and there's a couple thousand people in there that are active, you know, are good people, they're not trolls, they're not bots, and maybe that's a more productive way of handling this, you know, or an email chain, something.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing a documentary many years ago. This was in the early stages of the internet, and this is a documentary about how powerful the internet could be for bringing communities together. And it actually did have a good point, but it didn't pan out that way in reality. So what they did was, at the time, they took like a test street from somewhere in the UK. I can't remember where it was. And they basically took several hundred residents from that area, and they said, we're going to create for you a local forum where you can all communicate with each other about what's happening in your community. And all these people agreed to take part in it, so they were all chatting with each other in this local community, and loads of things got done at the local level. You know, there's potholes in the road that need fixing. Has anyone called up about that? And then somebody would do it, and so the people were able to work together, and it was a really good example of how a small local scale internet with people who actually know each other in person outside of the internet, how the internet could be used to connect them even more at the local level and result in a better community. You know, that was impressive. But yeah, it just didn't work out that way. Everybody spreaded their tentacles far and wide across the world, you know, including myself.
Yeah, I think another thing that I don't know if people saw this coming is not only is it people's interest, okay, great, now I have a place to talk about all my interests, but a lot of people now have places for their antisocial urges and parts of themselves to be exemplified, to be encouraged. So, I mean, people point to 4chan as an example that's kind of existed for over a decade now. But even, you know, there's a forum called incels.is. That's a bunch of incels talking on there. And I'm sure you've heard of looksmaxing. You've heard of that kind of in the media online.
I've heard of it. I can't remember what it means, though.
It's just kind of what women would call self-care. It's that for men.
Is this with the fake lip injections and all that stuff? Yeah.
You get stuff like that. It's crazy. And of course, I always joke that, like, of course, the second you introduce men into a topic like that, it goes to the extremes. They're trying to break their bones to make them grow back stronger and bigger and stuff like that. Just ridiculous. You get ridiculous stuff in it. But that originated, you can very easily trace the lineage of that idea to a forum started in 2018 called looksmax.org. There was a bunch of incels saying, I'm done being an incels. Let's try to look better. Let's try to be part of polite society. And then that breaks into the mainstream. And, you know, there's a lot of speculation here in the U.S. that there's a great video essay called Meme Theory by a guy named Imp Lemon on YouTube, pointing to, you know, a lot of Trump's victory in 2016, a lot of the rhetoric surrounding it. It sounded like a bunch of trolls online. You know what I mean? It's like love or hate Trump. It's like a lot of it of, you know, we're going to own you, we're going to destroy you, and we're just messing around. You can't tell what's ironic, what's serious, so a lot more things are permissible. That's very internet, very much a product of the internet. So that's kind of one speculation, is that, you know, a lot of things that are starting as antisocial movements online bleed into the mainstream in ways that you can't really predict, you know? Mm-hmm. So, there's been a lot of buzz about the idea of a post-truth society emerging because of the sensationalization of every area of public life and technology allowing for fakes and lies to spread so easily. Are we approaching a post-truth society? If we've already been in one for a while, when was that Rubicon crossed, do you think?
I don't think we've ever really lived in a truth society. There's always been, I don't know, big religions, and there's always been some sort of powerful forces that have tried to pull the wool over people's eyes in one shape or form, you know. Maybe I would say we're living in a fractured truth society because we now have a huge range of choices of what to believe. You know, things were much more conformist before the internet. It's weird. I heard a lot of people talking about things are getting more and more conformist now. There are efforts to make things more conformist, but the reason those efforts are there is because people are becoming more free-minded, and then you get the establishment goes, oh shit, people are questioning this, they're saying that, they're not believing this, suddenly they all believe that, which is not what we wanted them to believe. So that's why there's a big push to control speech these days, is because free speech is winning, and the internet is a big part of that. Unfortunately, you get a lot of trash opinions that are in the mix, but you have to have that. If you're going to have free speech, you're going to get a load of trash in there. If somebody comes along and says, no, we're going to be the arbiters who say this is trash, it's not allowed, only the good opinions are going to be allowed, and all the rest is just going to get blocked, that's no different to what we had before the internet, you know?
Yeah, where do you think people can go to find those truth tellers? I'm not even talking about politically, but just are there any authors that have really helped inform your worldview? Any, thinkers, intellectuals, historical figures, anything?
Yeah, but most of them are pre-internet.
Right, right.
I've been finding that I really enjoy discovering books that were written before I was born, and some of the incredible intellectuals that existed back then, and some of them most people have never heard of. They're not even famous. But it was like back then, in order to get a book published, you had to be a good writer. Nowadays, anyone can publish anything on the internet, but people used to put their heart and soul into books back then. And like the realm of psychology has been pretty much dead academically for a long time now. It's too controlled by all of the wokeism, whatever you call it. I don't even like the term woke, because I don't consider those people awake. I consider them to be asleep in a lot of ways. So I don't call them woke, but I'll just call them that so you know who I'm referring to here. But yeah, books used to get published, on psychology that were much more daring. Freud and Jung, and they were willing to go into all kinds of dark areas that went against the grain, and they took a lot of flack for it at the time as well. But going back and reading their books is so refreshing. It's not only was it refreshing then, but it's refreshing now, because those views have been suppressed now. Today, in the realm of psychology, Freud is kind of looked upon as just a freak who just saw penises everywhere, but he actually had a lot of other good writings that were very, very good. Carl Jung as well. The academia seems to shy away from him quite a lot. So those kinds of books that were really powerful, they need a resurgence. So any of us today can go back, pick up those books, learn from them, and bring that stuff forward to today's audience. And in a way, I've kind of been doing that a lot with my film analysis videos, especially Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, and the idea that when we fight with other people, we're fighting with parts of ourselves, and we take the evils that are in ourselves and we project them onto other people, and then we attack those people for having traits that started in ourselves. Carl Jung was onto all of this stuff, and that stuff is going on loads today. So I've done a lot of film analysis videos that get into Carl Jung's The Shadow and how we attack ourselves in others, the dark parts of ourselves. Yeah, I've been trying to take a lot of powerful learnings that existed from people in the past whose learnings seem to be getting forgotten. I'm trying to get people back into those things. Yeah, and I'm not the only one. There's lots of people doing it.
Yeah, and on the idea of there being a potential research of that, a resurgence of that personality type, I had I promise this is related. I had kind of this theory that a lot of American football players are very sociable people, good-looking guys on average. And if you think about it, well, that makes sense, because whenever they're younger, those good social skills probably made them seem more impressive in the eyes of adults. So therefore, they got a little more attention and training. And therefore, at a younger age, they blossomed. So their parents said, hey, this is a kid worth investing in, etc. Or they grew up with richer parents, and that kind of helped them develop more confidence. So then they were able to get also more access to programs that would help them with their skills, etc. But I thought, with the way the internet democratizes information, I kind of predicted that you might see a lot more kind of autistic, spectrum-y football players, because these are guys that maybe at 5 or 6 years old developed an obsession with football, and there they are in the backyard. They found the perfect throwing technique online, and they just doing it thousands of times a day. They don't need a coach. They don't need an expensive program. So I thought with the same idea with these academics of it's like, there are guys, I know a guy who's 19 years old, absolutely brilliant. He's read all of Marx in the original German just because he hates Marx and he wanted to really know, he wanted to know his enemy. And it's like, that's something that's so 21st century, having access to that information virtually for free. He didn't have to go anywhere to learn anything involved in that. So on one hand, that's a source of optimism, is looking at that. But also at the same time, it's like you look at how a majority of people choose to handle the Pandora's box that is a smartphone, and they're just like hours and hours a day of quite literally nothing. Because the big problem with short form content versus film is short form content. I'm young, I've done it. You can be scrolling on your phone for 6 hours a day straight. And afterwards, if I asked you, hey, what'd you look at? I could tell you maybe two or three things.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's just like I just kind of killed myself a little bit. You know what I mean? Those 6 hours of my life, that's reduced to a memorable 20 seconds I can recount to you.
Yeah.
Versus I could watch 3 movies in that same time, and I could give you a detailed, we could have a detailed analysis conversation. I can give you the details information about that entire movie. I was just enriched a little more. So it is this real interesting thing of how the freedom of choice of people's information diet, it really is creating I guess, a hierarchy of information in society, something like that. If we're in such an information-based society, and if it's all up to you, how do what do you eat in this endless buffet? It's very interesting, and there's no language, there's not really any guardrails to help people with this, you know?
Well, it's a funny one. I mean, you're in your early 20s, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
So you haven't lived without an internet, really.
No.
It's really weird because, like, I mean, I take my daughter around sometimes, and sometimes I show her things that existed before the internet, and it's like, to her, it's like, what? There was no internet? That's like the Wild West, you know? But to me, it's not. You know, it's just like, to me, the world today is pretty much the same as it ever was. We just got internet and mobile phones just tacked onto it, you know? But like, before the internet, there was this massive sort of problem. Nobody viewed it as a problem because it was just common and everybody did it. But like the terrestrial TV that we had, the broadcast TV in Britain, you had just 4 channels: BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, and Channel 4, and that was it. That was your media. You know, apart from you could go to shop and buy a newspaper. But what do they tell you in the newspapers? So you had 4 channels that played, and they all finished around midnight. So at midnight, all the channels would go off, and you'd be so bored you'd just go to bed. So people didn't tend to stay up all night because there was nothing to engage with unless they had like a VHS player and they could play a movie or something. But a lot of people had this routine with their lives where they would go to their 9-to-5 job, they would work there, and at home they would have the TV guide that would describe what all of the programming on the TV for the week, and people used to plan their week around what was on TV. So you get the TV guide, and everybody did this. You'd pick it up on a Monday. It'd be 1 week's worth of TV guide. You'd go through and you would circle all the things that you wanted to watch throughout the week. And half the time you were circling things not because you really wanted to watch them, but simply because it was the best out of the 4 options on that particular evening, you know? And so people just went to work and then just went home and just watched the TV. Everyone just sit there drinking cups of tea, watching the TV, and that was way worse than what we've got now. I could have done with the internet at that age because I had a lot of problems in my teens, really severe psychological and behavioural problems. I could have done with an internet to just look things up and find out stuff, but I had no means of getting the information. I could have gone to my local library, but it was only a small library. Otherwise, I'd have to go to Central Library in town, and I'd have to know which books to look for and all that kind of stuff. It was so hard to learn things back then, you know? And so now that, yeah, you do have this huge availability of information and things that you can access, and yet some of it is trash, but the good stuff is there if you really want to look for it as well. So I would rather be a young person today than when I was younger.
Yeah. No, it is super interesting how I'll follow there's a guy who's in his mid-20s, I think, named Jack Neal, and he has pretty much exclusively on people that he thinks are voices of influence towards Generation Z or are just members of Generation Z that are incredibly successful. And you'll have guys they started when they were 16 or 17 years old, and they're 21 now, and they're millionaires because they were like, oh, I was really into social media marketing, and I just sat there. I was getting the best quality information from the internet 12 hours a day. During high school, I was typing on the computer. When I got home, I was back on the computer. And it is really remarkable that, I agree, for all the pessimism today, it's like, man, opportunity for opportunity is just, it's insane. It's insane in today's world. Um, yeah. So I guess now let's talk about UFOs, shall we?
Yay.
So, yeah, right.
This is a subject I don't think I've ever talked about UFOs on any podcast or any video or anything, but go ahead.
I'm glad. Here we go. The exclusive. I love it.
Yeah.
There have been several congressional hearings here in the U.S., myriad whistleblowers from the military and intelligence communities, and supposed video evidence from the U.S. government the past few years surrounding UFOs. You know, I wrote this question last week, but just at the end of this past week, I believe on Friday morning, we got a fresh batch of information. Every member of the cabinet here in the U.S. said something on this, so it's crazy how this is breaking into the mainstream more and more as a legitimate concept. Trump, Vance, and several cabinet officials have made speculations of their own and promised new information will be released. Do you find the government buzz surrounding extraterrestrials to be a sign of imminent disclosure about the issue, or a sign of complex psy-ops at play, or both?
You know what? I really am not sure about this. Let me just grab a book off my shelf a moment, if I can quickly find it.
Go ahead.
Autumn one. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, so this is a book called The View from Forespace. Can you see it there? View from Forespace. Yeah. This is by Anthony C. Sutton, who is an author who they really don't want you to read this guy because he was. He wrote a lot in the 70s and 80s and 90s about technology, and pretty much everything that he ever wrote, all of his books that I've read, have been incredibly well documented. You know, the documentation support and what he's talking about, it's been incredibly powerful. This was the last book he did, and I think it was around 1998, 99, and he was talking about suppressed technologies. And I think he gives 10 chapters on different types of suppressed technologies. I only read it once and it just bombarded me with information. I haven't looked up everything that he's talked about, but everything that I have looked up, I've been like, wow, he was actually onto something here. There is actually a lot of evidence for this. And one of the chapters in there is about the so-called UFO technology. And he basically says that it's not UFO, it's not aliens. It's just technologies that have been developed here on Earth by humans that have been kept away from the public. And he says that a lot of that stuff started with the Nazis, the flying saucers thing, with the something to do with magnetism. You take magnetic discs and rotate them at a certain speed or something, and it causes objects to sort of move upwards and defy gravity. He said that the Nazis were developing this technology, and after World War II, the US got that technology from them and continued the research. And he said that that's what we've been seeing all these years, is just further development of this technology, and that it didn't come from aliens. Now, of course, I'm no expert on this. I read that one chapter. I've delved in and out of the UFO stuff here and there, but I've always been inclined towards believing that it's just man-made technology and not aliens. A while ago, I came across the interview the interviews that were done for the opening of 2001: A Space Odyssey. There was a book published which contains all of the scientist interviews. So 2001: A Space Odyssey, in its original the original cut that was shown to the executives, which was not the one that was released, it had a 10-minute section at the start of the film in which all of these famous scientists, real scientists, and a few other experts in different fields were all interviewed about the subjects of artificial intelligence, the possibility of alien contact, whether humans are going to replace themselves with machines, all this kind of stuff. All of that was recorded in a series of interviews with, I think it was 20-odd different experts, and it was spliced together and put at the start of the movie, and that was shown to the executives before the film was released. So after that, the film got released, and Kubrick removed all the scientist interviews from the start of the film. Right? You follow me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so for years I wanted to get hold of these interviews, but it's always been like, oh, they're not available. And then I found out that Anthony Fruin, who was an assistant to Kubrick, had actually published a book containing the transcripts of all these interviews. Apparently the original footage is missing and no one's found it since. And it was Jan Harlan, who was Kubrick's brother-in-law. I met him and started having some email conversations with him. And he put me onto it. He said, yeah, you can get these transcripts. So I had a read of it. And the general gist regarding the aliens was that all the scientists were absolutely convinced back then, most of them were convinced, that as soon as we start exploring space, we will immediately make contact with aliens. And their idea was that there are many, many super intelligent technological alien races all over the galaxy. They believed there was lots of them. And they believed that some of them are much older than our own solar system, so they're going to be way more advanced. And so they were convinced that the galaxy would just be teeming with technological interplanetary alien life. And that as soon as we get out there into space, they're going to notice us and they're going to make contact with us. And this is shown up in the Star Trek movies, the movie First Contact. They were really convinced of it. And it never happened. It's like the movie came out. We had the moon landings. We had rockets going up into space. We sent out the signals into space. SETI. I can't remember what that's. SETI. Some project about sending messages out into space to get in contact with aliens. They've been listening to the trying to look out for alien messages that are getting sort of sent around the galaxy. The idea that would be aliens are constantly sending communications to each other all over the place, and that we humans should be able to pick up on them if we just look around and listen, None of it seems to have happened. If it has happened, the government has deliberately covered it up and kept it quiet from us. But the general consensus seems to be, not that I think consensus really fully exists, but the general vibe seems to be that it didn't happen. And so now that's called the Fermi paradox. The idea that if the galaxy is full of this intelligent alien life with technology and interplanetary travel, we should have heard from them, and we haven't. And Kubrick came to the conclusion that the reason we haven't made any contact is because there probably are technological races out there who are interplanetary, but they are so far away, they're so rare in the universe that the chances of two of them coming across each other, this just ain't going to happen. That was the conclusion Kubrick reached. And I think that's the case. I don't think we've had any contact with aliens or anything like that. And this UFO disclosure thing, I think it's... There's a thing that goes on which Trump is really, really good at this particular thing when he's getting criticised. Now, I'm not talking as a pro or anti-Trumper. I stay out of the whole party politics thing. I don't go telling people who to vote for. I don't go around saying, oh, the Democrats are terrible or the Republicans are terrible. I'm not talking pro or anti-Trump. I'm just saying Trump is good at this one thing. If there's an issue where he's getting attacked in the media over something he's done, whether he was rightfully or wrongfully attacked, he is very good at putting something out that distracts people and sends them off in a different direction. And it's really, I actually find it hilarious how he does this and how easily he does it sometimes. He just has to come out and say something wild. They're attacking him on one thing, and then he'll just come out and say something like, oh, maybe we should just go and take over Greenland anyway. And then the media goes berserk. And then they forgot about the previous things that they were attacking him on, and they've moved on to that. And then he just does it again and again and again. And it's so funny how the media falls for that again and again, and all of his critics fall for it again and again. It's very comedic. And I wonder whether this UFO disclosure thing is a part of that, because he's having a lot of troubles over this Iran Strait of Hormuz situation with the war that's going on there. I don't really know what is actually going on there, what the real agendas are. I hear lots of theories, but I'm not convinced on any of them yet. I'm open-minded on it. But because he's getting criticised on that so much, then it's like, oh, we've got UFO files coming out, or we've got another space trip going around the moon, and it might be a distraction thing on that, but I don't know. Apparently, the stuff that has been released is nothing special. Have you looked at it?
Yeah, I have looked at it, and I agree with you. And yeah, I think multiple things can be true. I think that this is very politically convenient for Trump to have this come out at this specific moment. But also, I think it can be the case that the Pentagon has their hands on anomalous technology that they've encountered, that they've recorded, that they just don't understand. And the intentions stated by some of these officials as to why, and members of Congress as to why this release has happened, is kind of to ask the public, do you guys have any idea what's going on here? Which is a very interesting, because a lot of people have said, like, okay, let's imagine there is a world where there's aliens, and for some reason they recognize and value human structures of power so much that they went to the government, or they've targeted the government or military bases, but not the everyday civilian. So the government does have their hands on some technology or something. If they have no idea what it is or how to handle it, or if they realize that, they could not defeat it in combat, why announce that? Because that's only, that's only going to make people go, what? Aren't we paying you to do this? Let's overthrow the government if they can't. We'll have contact with the aliens instead, which is kind of absurd. But where I think the idea of, why would aliens bother with human power structures? You know what I mean? Because if they're so advanced, they'd look at us as maybe a pile of ants. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, you're not thinking about, where's the queen ant? How do I communicate with her? It's just, what are all these ants doing here? There has been, and a lot of people that talk about UFOs, there have been people in the United States that have worked at nuke bases. There's a book called UFO Nukes by a gentleman named Robert Hastings that documents interviews and instances reported by people who have worked on nuke facilities. What's so interesting about that is here in the U.S., I'm sure it's the same in any nuclear state, you have to work on a base like that, you need to be psychologically screened better than pretty much any human for any job possible, right? If you take an Advil in the morning instead of your normal, to accompany your normal coffee or something like that, you need to report that. Quite literally anything needs to be reported. So you can't say these people just went off and became potheads, or they started losing their memory or something, or they went
Can I just interject at that one point?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not very convinced that these intelligence agencies are nearly as effective as that with that kind of thing as you say. I think they try to project themselves as being super efficient in order to scare their enemies. But I think they're a lot more chaotic and easily infiltrated than people say. Like apparently with the Scientology movement, apparently a lot of Scientology people infiltrated the CIA to destroy files on the Scientology movement.
Yeah.
Really? It was that easy? That's. I think the CIA has actually come out and said that it happened. So it's surprising how ineffective, how inefficient organizations can become, no matter how much funding is involved in them. Yeah.
That's a great point. And if you take a step back, it is a pretty funny image of, it's like, okay, wait a minute. If the government is trying to project this image that we have our hands on technology that's so scary, we don't even know what to do about it. It's like, well, yeah, it's like maybe part of that is just so China goes, wait a minute, pause. I don't know if I want to deal with you guys. If you have something so scary, even you're scared of it. What if you pointed that against us? So I think you're definitely right. And the thing I always say on this topic at the end of the day, I don't have any beliefs. I don't have any agenda on this. I just say, it's probably something rather than nothing. And even if that something is an incredibly complex psy-op, to me, that's equally interesting to this is alien life. Yeah. So,
Can I just say that? Please, go on. You say what you're going to say.
All this to say that the big thing that I think, this is something that people point to is why would aliens come now? Why would they care about us? Well, the splitting of the atom could have, they had speculated it could have chain reactions beyond this world, whatever that means. I don't know. And then also the development of AI, because I used the ant pile analogy earlier. The development of AI, the biggest benefit we've seen of AI so far, where it actually innovates, is taking a ridiculously large amount of information and coming to easily digestible conclusions. So even if, to get really out there, if their methods of communication, I feel like in 2001, Kubrick was trying to get at this vibe a little bit. If their method of communication, let's just to put in a sentence, involves more information than we can even normally perceive in the sentences we use and the languages we use. Well, AI could be the big filter. So to use the ant pile analogy, it's like, if one day we came across the ants and they had developed a calculator, well, that's not the easiest way to communicate, but that's far better than just trying to use human language to talk to ants. You can interface a little bit there. So there's just some speculation that I think, that's pretty interesting.
That's pretty cool. I like that idea. I hadn't thought of that one before. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the scientists who were interviewed for 2001, they did actually say at one point that if we make contact with alien races, we won't be making contact with organic beings because they will have evolved into machines, and that we will be contacting their machines, and it'll likely be our machines contacting their machines. Of course,
yeah,
it's all sci-fi speculation. We've got no idea how much life there is in the universe, where it is, what forms it takes. We just don't have a clue.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I also want to talk about, you had mentioned that in Nazi Germany, what that specific, I think, kind of anti-gravity, again, to put into a word, technology you had mentioned, there have been stories of Holocaust survivors recounting there being something they called the bell, which was this weird technology that they just said resembled a massive bell, that they said that they saw them at least trying to develop anti-gravity technology. Some people claim to have actually seen something, and they thought, if we're going to exterminate these people anyway, we might as well test this on them, or it's okay if they see it because we don't expect them to survive, right? Or to test it on them, flinging them up and down, weird stuff like that. And then, of course, I'm sure you're aware of Operation Paperclip, which Annie Jacobsen is this journalist that wrote a book kind of recounting that. But basically, at the end of World War II, we realized that what made the Nazis so efficient, in part, was that they had this incredibly elite class of scientists. And we thought rounding them up and killing them the way we would, or putting them on trial the way we would a military official, is just kind of a waste of that talent. So instead, we brought a lot of them here, and we thought, well, you can't put them in public life because people won't be cool with that. You can't have them run for office. People won't be cool with that. You can't just give them a mansion the way they enjoyed it in Germany. Because people wouldn't be cool with that. So we're going to embed them in our intelligence agencies. We're going to embed them in our administrative agencies, places like NASA. Yeah. And the biggest example of that is Werner von Braun. Yeah. Was the head of NASA during the moon missions. And if you look at on the NASA website today, you look at his bio, he was the developer of the V2 rocket, which is incredibly destructive in Nazi Germany. And I think, in Dr. Strangelove, Kubrick obviously is very well aware of this. You have Dr. Strangelove, I think, in both looking like an erect penis and looking like a Roman salute at the end. He lets up his arm. Tell me a little bit of what you think Kubrick was getting at. We've talked a little bit about UFO technology. We've talked a little bit about, Operation Paperclip adjacent stuff. How much of this do you think he was consciously aware of?
How much was Kubrick aware of?
Yes. A movie like a huge movie, think like Doctor Strange. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, there are some videos of Werner von Braun from the 1950s and 60s where he actually did become a bit of a public figure. They did sort of roll him out publicly, and they had him do presentations. But, they changed the history and said he wasn't really involved with the Nazis. And that was part of Operation Paperclip, change their histories to make out that they didn't really support the Nazi regime. But there was a public demonstration that von Braun did. I think you can still see it on YouTube, where he outlines his plan for the rotating tourist station that you see in 2001, where it creates artificial gravity by spinning and having the characters walk on the inside of the wheel, like mice walking in a wheel. He laid that all out in a presentation. And Kubrick put that in the movie. So no doubt he was aware of that. The Strangelove character himself, there's loads of connections between the Strangelove character and von Braun. There's a point where two of the other characters in the room are whispering to each other about the von Braun character, and they actually say something about his previous name and where in Germany he came from. So Kubrick was right onto all that stuff. It's amazing how much research Kubrick did. I don't know where he got all the time to read all of this stuff. You go to the Kubrick archives and the amount of things that he was reading, he must have been a speed reader. Stacks of magazines and books, and somehow he'd managed to absorb all of this stuff. And I've got all these books behind me here. I'd say there's probably a third of all those books that I just haven't had time to properly read. And I don't know where he got the time to do all this research and make the movies. Crazy.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about Kubrick's boxes. I'm sure you're aware of those.
Yeah.
His assistant had some reporters over after his death and was talking about these boxes full of meticulous research he had done for his films. Tell me a little about those.
Yeah, you can go down to the Kubrick archives in London and you can have a look at them. They don't let you just browse through all of the boxes yourself and just pick things off the shelf. You go into a room which is designed to look like the end room in 2001: A Space Odyssey. You know, where it's got the light panels on the floor and the Louis XIV decor or whatever it is. The room in the archives for visitors is designed like that, so it's like you are Dave Bowman arriving in the room, and they've got computer systems set up there where you can punch in keywords and stuff and it will come back and it'll say, oh, this box has got this item and this box has got that item. And then you ask the curator to bring those boxes out for you. And if he can find them, he'll go and get them, wheel them out. And you have to put on latex gloves before you touch anything. And you're not allowed to take in any devices that you can film the items with. And you're not allowed to have a pen. If you're going to do any writing, you have to just use a pencil so that if you draw on any of the materials, they can rub it off afterwards and things like that. And so it's pretty cool. But the downside that I found, and I don't know if it's still like this now because I haven't been there for over 10 years, but I found that the organization of the boxes and the keyword function search was not very good. Sometimes I would just look up random boxes and I would say, well, okay, it would list like 3 things that were in the box. I'd say, bring that box out to me. They'd bring it out and there would be lots of stuff in there that went way beyond the keywords that were associated with the box. And so I was like, you know, it's not going to be easy for me to find what I'm looking for here if these items aren't sufficiently catalogued into the computer. So that kind of put me off going back. But the boxes that I did look at were fantastic. There was all kinds of great stuff in them. I found one box that was, it was Christian Kubrick's conceptual artwork for 2001: A Space Odyssey. She painted all these aliens and things. You know, the idea, Kubrick was toying with the idea of showing aliens in the film. And she painted all this bizarre artwork, but a lot of it incorporated surrealist elements from the likes of, oh, what the hell's his name? Magritte. René Magritte. You ever seen his work?
No.
He's like a surrealist artist, really, really good. But there's certain visual motifs that occur again and again in his work that are unmistakable. So Christian Kubrick had incorporated elements of Magritte's artwork into the space alien images for the concept images for 2001. And so that was a really good box. I mean, you could spend weeks and weeks and weeks there just going through all these boxes. I found all kinds of great stuff, but I couldn't get the permissions to get photocopies of them. They wouldn't give it to me, and that's why I stopped going. I had some stuff that I found in there that absolutely proved multiple theories that I've got on Kubrick's films, and they wouldn't let me take the copies of the stuff. So I was like, okay, that really deflated my motivation to go down there. Yeah.
Are there a few of those you can talk about here of items you found that really confirmed theories? Are there any off the top of your head you can remember?
One of the big ones was, and this has been one of the most controversial takes on Kubrick or any subject that I've ever put out. This upsets a lot of people. Kubrick was very familiar with US economic history, with the gold standard and the Federal Reserve, and how the Federal Reserve Act was passed, because there was some laws broken in how that was done. And basically that handed over a hell of a lot of power, economic power, over the monetary system to private bankers. Kubrick was onto that stuff, and he encoded it in the Shining film. So you had a gold room in the Shining film, which didn't exist in the novel. And there's a big deal made out of this gold room in multiple scenes. And You see Jack Nicholson in the photo at the end of the film, and he's with a crowd of people, and you're like, what the hell's he doing there? It's 1921, stuff like that. And I was reading in some of the biographies on Kubrick, the well-written ones that were pre-internet, not internet rumor, really well-researched biographies, that Kubrick was quite heavily into gold investment. And if you've explored economic history with the US, gold has been a major bugbear with the system over there. Gold was banned from private ownership up until the 1970s. Once the private bankers got hold of the monetary system, they persuaded the government to ban gold ownership. And so people were told, you have to hand over your gold to the government, and we're going to put it in Fort Knox. Yeah. But a lot of people just didn't hand it over and just kept it anyway. And it was only in the 1970s that gold ownership was legally allowed again. And there's a pattern throughout history where regimes that are totalitarian or are becoming totalitarian, they virtually always ban gold ownership, because gold ownership allows people to have economic. It allows them to keep their money in a way that doesn't get destroyed by inflation. Gold has always been used to protect against inflation. Yeah. So gold gives people a lot of economic power when it's privately owned. So it was banned in the US till the 1970s. Kubrick was onto this stuff, and he put a lot of commentary about it into the Shining film regarding the gold room. Right. So I'd already got onto this stuff, and I'd published a video or two about it. And it caught on a bit, and there was a lot of arguing over it, and I had some people being nasty to me about it. But when I went down to the Kubrick archives, I wasn't specifically looking for evidence of this gold issue, but in the Shining film, where Jack does his typing, he has this huge book next to his typewriter called Jack's Scrapbook. And you see it a couple of times in the film, and it's got newspaper articles in it, but we don't get to see the articles in detail in the film. So when I was in the Kubrick archives, I'm looking through the computer, Jack's Scrapbook is here? Okay, let's have a look at this, bring that out. And they brought this book out to me. It was about that thick. It was huge. It was really heavy. Put it on the desk, and I went through it, and it was all articles about World War II, the gold standard, the Federal Reserve, anything to do with gold was in there, Nazi gold. It was full of economic stories about not just US monetary history, but also how it tied in with European monetary history and how it tied in with World War II. There was a lot of stuff in there about how the Federal Reserve Act was passed and all that kind of stuff. It was all there in this scrapbook. And I was like, whoa. Okay, I knew this theme was in the film, but I didn't expect the evidence of it to be so utterly blatant in this book, So, yeah, that was a major one.
Yeah, that's huge. You tell someone that's used to watching like Marvel movies and stuff about subliminal messaging and small details like that in films, and I'm sure they would say something like, why would Kubrick have that be one of the underlying themes of the film when quite literally one of the biggest pieces of evidence is invisible in the final cut? How would you respond to that? I'm sure you get that criticism a lot from people.
Yeah, basically, I think what Kubrick was doing was that he didn't want the messages of his movies to be understood while they were being released. And if he'd have took all the hidden stuff that was in, say, like The Shining or 2001: A Space Odyssey, and he made it obvious to the point where it would become noticed and known when the movie first came out, that would have brought Kubrick under attack. The studios would have got on his case and said, what the hell are you doing? We didn't fund you to make a movie about the gold standard. With 2001: Space Odyssey, we didn't fund you to make a movie that warns people about the dangers of AI, because they thought he was making a pro-AI movie when he made it. Yeah. IBM provided support, logistical support and funding and stuff like that. I don't know if they supplied funding, but they were definitely involved. And so there's a letter in the Kubrick archives. After they saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, Kubrick had made the anti-AI messages too obvious in the film. And so IBM wrote an angry letter to Kubrick saying, take our logo off the movie, take it out of every scene that it's in. They were really pissed off because he'd let the cat out the bag on that issue, And so by the time he got to The Shining, he was a lot more subtle about how to encode the messages in a way where it wouldn't be discovered for many, many years. And I actually think that Kubrick was thinking so far ahead that he didn't want most of these messages to be discovered until after he died. I think he planned it that way, because why did he keep all of that archive stuff? You know, for decades and decades, he kept all of this stuff, kept it away from the public. Why does that get released after he dies? I think he basically wanted that to happen. I think he probably made some arrangements with his family to do that. And I think the whole idea is that once I die, then people can start to discover what my movies are really about. But there's no comeback for me because I'm dead. I'm not going to get attacked in the media. I'm not going to get my future movies cancelled by the studio. I'm not going to get sued because, you know, he could potentially get sued. If you make a movie and you tell the studio, oh, it's about this, and you actually secretly make a movie about something else, they could sue you for that, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of logic that was going on. He encoded it very deeply, and he made it so that people would only begin to discover the stuff after he died. And I think having the Kubrick archives there was a way of allowing the information to start to flood out that would let people decode the movies. Yeah.
I just want to hear, are there any, like, one or two other theories that you've had confirmed from stuff at the archives you could talk about? Off the top of the head?
Yes. Another one in The Shining. I said many, many years ago, I think I was the first to publish about this, that young Danny Torrance was actually strangled by his father, not by some ghost woman in a bathroom. It was his dad who really did strangle him. I'd already done videos about that, but when I looked at in the Kubrick archives at the alternative poster design sketches for the film, I can't remember who Kubrick hired. He hired some artist, and he had him do like hundreds of these sketches, concept sketches, for the poster of the movie. And again in those concept sketches, there was images of a dark shadow male figure with broad shoulders strangling a boy. It wasn't a woman, it was a man who was strangling him in those alternative posters. So for me, that was, yeah, okay, Jack strangled Danny, you know.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else was there? Trying to remember now. It's been quite a while since I went down there. I know I found a lot of stuff about A Clockwork Orange. Kubrick was very into his conspiracy stuff, and in quite a few of his movies, he put the sort of the pyramid and all-seeing eye images. He put those into his movies, and it's there on the poster for A Clockwork Orange. You've got Alex coming forward with I think he's got a knife in his hand, and he's got an eyeball, a wristwatch eyeball, and he's inside the letter A, so that's like a triangle on the poster.
Yeah.
So you got the eye in the triangle right there on the poster. I'd spotted that quite early on. And I noticed there was multiple other points in the movie where Kubrick had arranged specific shots symmetrically to create the impression of pyramid and eye stuff going on. There's lots of shots in the movie that do that, but it's very easy to miss if you're not looking for it. Well, anyway, I looked at the alternative poster designs for A Clockwork Orange in the Kubrick archives, and again, there was lots and lots of them, and it was tons and tons of pyramids and eyes all over the place, much more blatant and easier to notice. And it's like, it almost seems to me like Kubrick had that stuff done so that it could be seen in the archives, you know. I think like the collaborators he worked with, he didn't tell them exactly what he was up to. Everyone he worked with just seemed to be kept in the dark. But he would have these collaborators do all these designs, and a lot of them weren't even intended for publication, but he had them do them anyway. I think it was Ken Adam who did the set designs for the first James Bond movie called Dr. No. In fact, he did set designs for a lot of James Bond movies. Very talented guy. Kubrick hired him to do the set designs for the war room in Dr. Strangelove. And Ken Adams stated this himself. It's his own account of it. He said that Kubrick had him do all kinds of different designs, and that they were all rejected. And what Kubrick really wanted was just for Ken Adam to just take the same set design that was done for part of the Doctor No film and just repeat the same and just alter it a little bit for the Doctor Strangelove film. And it was quite funny when he described it. He was saying, Kubrick just had me doing loads and loads of designs, and he kept sort of rejecting them all. And I realized after a while that he just didn't want to tell me what he really wanted, which was the same fucking design from the other movie, And you get this time and time again with people who collaborated with Kubrick. He would have them do tons and tons of variations on things that he was never going to officially use. Even Arthur C. Clarke, he did the same with him. He had him write all kinds of chapters for the novelization of the 2001 film, none of which he intended to use. And he seemed to have done that partially because Arthur C. Clarke was trying to get the novelization of 2001 published before the movie came out. And Kubrick's like, no, I want my movie to go out first. And he was fighting with Clarke over this. And so he kept having Clarke write useless chapters for the novel that were never going to get used. And, Clarke came to the conclusion that he was just stalling me from publishing the book. These are the kinds of games Kubrick played. It was crazy.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what do you think are the end goals of some of those mind games? Do you think that's him being this obsessive control freak? There's accusations of him being abusive towards Shelley Duvall while working on The Shining? Or do you think this is just his genius method? He's testing people, he's trying to get the best performance possible out of them. He wants to keep them guessing.
Regarding the Shelley Duvall thing, I think that's a bit of a complex situation, that one, because there is a behind-the-scenes documentary on The Shining. Have you seen it? Yeah. And
yes,
you see him he's given her quite a bit of stick there, isn't he?
A bit of a hard time,
But at the same time, he does actually show that she was actually being a bit of a bitch in a lot of ways. She's messing around. She's demanding attention. She's pretending to be sick, laying on the floor and stalling the shoot. And she's arguing with Kubrick and annoying him and stuff. It wasn't just Kubrick, it was her as well. And so it seems like he was at least partially responding to that. I don't agree with the way he responded to it. But yeah, I think she was being a bit of a nuisance for him, and he was just playing her at her own game and beating her, basically. And in the end, he got the last laugh because he took all those embarrassing takes of her acting like an idiot on the set, and he put them out in the documentary for the world to see. It was a bit harsh.
Yeah.
But also, I think he was drawing a parallel between himself and Jack Torrance because in the biographies I read, they're saying that some of the cast and crew, they had an ongoing joke that Kubrick looked like Jack Nicholson. He had the similar eyebrows and he was being like scruffy and he had a big beard, and Jack Nicholson was unshaven in the film and stuff like that. And I think in the documentary, the behind-the-scenes documentary, Kubrick is acting. He's not being his real self. He's deliberately acting like a lunatic towards Shelley Duvall to create a parallel between himself and the Jack Nicholson character. But that gets into other aspects of the movie that I've explained in other videos, and I don't want to go off on a huge tangent on that one here. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any videos or analysis you've made in the past or theories that you look back at and you go, I don't know, I disagree with that now, or I would have worded that differently? Is there anything like that in your career?
Yeah, the biggest one I had was when I first did the video on the sexual abuse themes in The Exorcist. The first version of that I did, I believed that the filmmakers, that William Peter Blatty had intended it to be that way. I didn't have the proof that he intended it, but I thought, how else can it be? So I did the video from that point of view. And then I discovered years later that I got that completely wrong, and I had to redo the video. And the redone version is the one that's on YouTube now. What I basically found was that if you look at the history of so-called real exorcism cases, very often there was a suspicion of sexual abuse that had gone on. Because it always seemed to happen with pubescent boys or girls. That's a very sexually wild age. A lot of problems can come out behaviorally during puberty. And And yet in those cases, there was suspicions of sexual abuse that led to crazy sexual behavior. And when that happens within a religious family, sometimes the family just don't want to deal with the reality of it. And so they take the sexual behavior of the child and they attribute it to a demon. Yeah. And that allows them to go into denial about the possibility of sexual abuse, or just go into denial about the fact that the kid has just started masturbating, basically. You imagine a really harsh religious family, a God-fearing parent walks into the room and the kid's masturbating. Oh my God, can't deal with this. They're possessed, that type of thing. So I started finding all that across the history. And then I realized that William Peter Blatty didn't even know what was going on there. He thought that all these cases were real possession cases. And he incorporated all of the sexual insanity from those cases into his novel. But he didn't realize where it came from. So he has this demon possessed girl who's masturbating herself in front of people, and a crucifix stuck up there, and she's swearing at people, and half of the stuff that she does in that film is sexual based. You think if she was possessed by a demon, she would be literally killing people and stuff, but it all seems to be sexual. So Blatty put all of that in, and I don't think he realised why it was there. And then William Friedkin made the movie, and he basically was quite faithful to the novel. I don't think either of them realised that was a major part of the history of so-called spiritual possession cases. So I had to redo that video and present it from that point of view, and I had to say, yeah, these guys didn't intend this. Yeah.
That's super interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's this weird thing of like, I guess maybe even to add credit to that, symbolically, I mean, there's a lot of things of, I had someone who, I used to attend church a lot, and I had someone who was kind of in a mentor role, and he was doing, kind of answering questions from a lot of us younger folk at the beginning of the service. And I had asked him the question, I go, you see videos from the Middle East, from Africa, of a lot of places they'd be called third world countries or underdeveloped countries, where it does really look like a demonic possession the way you would imagine it. People rolling around the floor, people just with insane, like infinite energy violently, and they're not on drugs or anything. I go, what do you think that is? I go, do you think these other countries are more prone to demonic activity, and why do you think that is? And he said from a Christian perspective, he goes, well, the devil needs to do more to possess people like that, because we possess ourselves with the narcissism and overabundance of technology and distraction from reality that we have here because of technology, because of the infinite commodities we have. So I just thought that was an interesting idea. So it's almost like if it's like the demons, if these young people are in, these very vulnerable years developmentally, and if sexuality is one area where people could really go wrong in their development, I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense that you would see that kind of possession. And I also find it so interesting artistically that he was maybe, incorporating these themes without even being aware of it. I think that makes for something interesting. And speaking of, just on that more subliminal level, one of the last questions I want to ask you today, a lot of people see the monolith from 2001 as kind of a skeleton key to Kubrick's work. They also claim that the diamonds and the lights section of 2001 is related. They also say that in Full Metal Jacket, you can see a building and the way the camera pans on it and the structure of it, it looks like it could be a monolith or the monolith or a different interpretation of it. What do you think of that? And what have you come to think of the monolith as representing?
Okay, so two different strands there. On the issue of the 7 diamonds or whatever it is that are seen floating around in 2001: A Space Odyssey, I did make a video outlining multiple instances of the 7 diamonds occurring across Kubrick's films. I think it appears in at least 5 Kubrick films. I don't know what to make of it, and I put it out there in the hope that somebody would get in touch and tell me, oh, I've solved this. I've had a lot of people in the comments section on that one give their ideas. I've had tons of emails from people saying, oh, I think the diamonds are about this. And I haven't found any of the theories convincing yet. but I don't have one of my own either. It's a pattern that's there in those movies, and it's too specific to be accidental. I don't know what it is. Yeah, I really don't know. So that's that on that one. The monolith itself, as you've probably seen in some of my videos, I think it's basically the cinema screen rotated 90 degrees. Although Kubrick would often overlap different metaphors. It's like, so on one level, the monolith is the cinema screen, and it's like the movie itself is the intelligent force that's come to educate the audience, because we're the apes, and we dance around the movie confused about it in the same way that the apes dance around the monolith itself. So I love all that aspect of it. And yeah, I've done a few videos on that, so I won't go into the details. But I do think the monolith doubles up as having other meanings. It's a doorway. It's shaped like a doorway. And at the end of the movie, Dave Bowman, reborn, exits through that doorway in a hotel room that's got no doors. So, it's clearly the doorway out. I think it also represents the terrifying dark unknown. There's an aspect of 2001 that I really like, which is like it's like a horror movie about the terrifying vastness of the cosmos, and the idea that we can travel between stars and across the galaxy and stuff. I think Kubrick recognized the difficulty of that, the unimaginable huge spaces between different solar systems, and even just our own solar system is unbelievably huge. And so in the movie, you've got the Jupiter mission, which it takes them over 18 months to get from Earth just to Jupiter, never mind getting to the nearest star. And on the way, they have all these troubles, they're lost in the blackness and all that kind of stuff, and it's all kind of scary. So yeah, I think the monolith, with its scary music that's associated I think it is a representation of the vast, impenetrable darkness of that makes up most of the universe itself. Yeah, maybe there's some other metaphors mixed in there as well, but those three I definitely see. Yeah.
Is there any evidence that Kubrick had any interest in psychedelics? Because I think a movie like 2001, a lot of people describe as psychedelic because of the absurd imagery, out of placeness of so many things. And The Shining, you have the theme of nonlinear time being explored. Is there anything on that?
Well, he did actually talk about this in one of his interviews. He was asked, did you ever take any psychedelic drugs? And he said no. He said he didn't want to take them because he was worried that it might interfere with his existing thought process. I mean, the guy was a friggin' genius, Yeah. And he knew that he was a genius. He knew that he had this unbelievably powerful intellect. And so maybe he just didn't want to take the risk. I don't want to take this stuff and scramble my brain and lose the abilities that I've got. But I don't think he was particularly against it either. He just didn't want to take the risk himself. But the kind of spiritual, deep unconscious processes that are accessed with psychedelic drugs, those can be accessed in other ways. You can do it through meditation. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to have the drugs to do that. There's other ways of doing it. I believe Kubrick had managed to tap into those parts of the mind himself through other means. I think a lot of it was also just the fact that he did so much reading up and so much research. I think he probably began to explore the limits of what academic science teaches, especially when you're exploring the subjects of 2001: A Space Odyssey, when you're getting into the very fabric of the universe itself and the nature of reality and all that kind of stuff. And he was reading on the fringes of human knowledge. And when you start reading on that stuff, you start to realize the academics have not got it all nailed. There are tons and tons of things that they just don't know. They've come up with some brilliant stuff. They've become very good at manipulating physical reality to give us a lot of these wonderful things that we've had, although a lot of it doesn't actually come from academia anyway. That's quite important. All the bricks and mortar and the glass and all that, this was all created by people pre-academia, pre-universities. So, So I think Kubrick was exploring all that stuff and all the deep psychology he was exploring as well. He was into Carl Jung. If you go read Carl Jung, he gets so deep into the unconscious, and Freud as well. They get so deep into unconscious processes and unconscious symbolism that you can actually get yourself familiar with a lot of psychedelic experiences just through reading their books, you know. They get you into dream states and dream symbolism and all that kind of stuff. So I think Kubrick had explored so much of that stuff that he didn't need the LSD. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my last question for you is one of the great mysteries of Kubrick is what would have become of his Napoleon project. Throughout his career, he had been wanting to do this massive Napoleon film. Some people speculate it would have been a multi-part series or multi-part film. He had note cards that included details of every day of Napoleon's life, of Josephine's life, of a lot of his marshals' lives. He had, apparently, there's been thousands of books published on Napoleon. He had a vast majority of them. What do you think? What do you think that would have been? What do you think that could have become? You know, because his AI project he handed over to Steven Spielberg, but this Napoleon project seemed to be kind of, you know, this baby that was never born. He was constantly pregnant with it, you know.
I'm sorry to disappoint, but it's a subject I haven't really looked into much. I know there's a lot of stuff in the Kubrick archives about it, and there's been one or two books published upon, you know, what he was planning to do with the movie. I haven't read them. I don't actually know much about Napoleon myself. I haven't read a single biography on him, so I'm just a complete layman on that subject, and I'm going to have to back out and say, I ain't got a clue, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, same. I mean, I just know that I know the mainstream understanding of Napoleon's life, but I know that he had also had a lot of really interesting ideas on how the state should handle banking. So I think perhaps that could lead into it. That'd be very Kubrick of him to tap into that angle that almost no one else even discusses. Yeah, very interesting. I guess for you, do you have, my final question is for you, do you have a Napoleon project of yourself? Is there some kind of video, some kind of series, some kind of analysis, maybe even a book of essays or something you've wanted to put together that you just haven't had the time or you're still working on it or something?
Well, yeah, I've been writing a book on film analysis for several years, writing it on and off because you can't just take time out and not earn a living to just write this big book. But yeah, I've got this book, which I haven't given it a finalized title yet, but it's basically the film analysis stuff. And it's going to take a lot of the stuff that I've already published in video form and put those into a written form for the book. And it's going to have lots more chapters on other aspects that I haven't talked about in videos before. And some of those subjects are things that don't lend themselves to the video format. So I'm about 90% of the way through writing that book at the moment. I want to get about another 5 or 6 chapters done on it, and then I think that'll be ready to put out. I'm intending on self-publishing it because I did have a major publisher approach me a few years ago, saying, "Hey, why don't you do a book and we'll put it out there?" And I spent a while liaising with that publisher, and we had a chapter list together and everything. And then when it came to the contract, I was just like, "There's no way I'm signing that contract. This is awful. This is so disadvantageous to me." And you know, so that was that. And also, you guys will get most of the profits, and I'm the one taking all the risks and doing all the writing and stuff. So I thought, no, I don't need to do that because I've got my audience anyway. And I can communicate with them directly via my site and via YouTube. So yeah, I'll just publish this myself, and that way I don't have to adjust any of the content to what the publisher feels comfortable with. Because there was some chapters that they were like, "Oh, I'm not sure if you can publish that. That might upset a few people." I'm like, I don't care if it upsets people. That's their problem, you know. So the book, when it goes out, it will be exactly the way I want it to be. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, hey, as a fan of your work, I say on behalf of everybody, that's exactly what we'd want. So that's really exciting to hear, and that'll be really cool.
Thanks.
Glad to hear that. Yeah. Rob Iger, thank you so much for coming on. If anyone wants to support you, where could they find you?
At my website, collativelearning.com, COLLATIVE, Collative Learning. There's a YouTube channel of the same name, but the website is the best place because I'm currently backing away from YouTube quite a bit because of the shenanigans that YouTube has been up to for a long time, where they're causing problems and they're promoting AI-generated versions of people's work. And I've had this happen to me. The algorithm promotes AI rip-off versions of my stuff while not showing people my own. So I've had enough of this crap. So yeah, I'm shifting a lot of my work over so that it can only be viewed on my channel. And a lot of it's still free, but the video embeds are on the channel and not searchable on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on. This is a great conversation, Rob. I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Carter. Great.
All right, so you have a great one.
Hey.
Bye-bye.